April the 22nd, 2026. Guys, this is part 2 of what we decided to call the Ancient Intelligence Files. We started yesterday, we talked about it, and the information is so vast and there's tons of it that it's hard to put it into perspective and to organize it into a logical situation. And so there was a tremendous amount of technical information handed down also. And to me, that's very interesting. But what I'm going to try to do is to not get that involved with it and get on with the storyline, because I understand that. But one of the reasons that the information is given to me, guys, is because me and you. In other words, for 15 years, some of you have been with me since, go back to the BP oil spill, the Bayou Corn sinks, the first comets that we started watching, things like that. And we watched sensors, we watched satellite information, solar wind speeds, we watched CERN, you and I. And think about that. And what I'm seeing now and kind of being told is that not only me, but the people that have been watching were here for a reason. And let me put it this way. Neither I, now maybe some of you guys did, we understood the concept of what we were watching, and I, in a very simple way, tried to explain what I understood about it. But what it was, guys, is we were being prepped for a final exam. That's what I'm being told. In other words, we weren't getting the answers. We were being trained in the techniques of observation. And in that course, the ideas were introduced into our mind about this. And it was a system designed to slowly bring people into what is about to happen. So again, congratulations, from what I understand, that the people who have been here for a long time, and maybe not from the exact beginning, but for a long time, and the people that maybe are more recent and have been doing this type of study and observations maybe on a different platform, that it was all a prep for what's about to happen in June. In other words, so that we could accept it, so that we could fathom the knowledge maybe in a way. And so with CERN being tied into all this, I want to talk about it, try to keep it down on a non-technical level, because I enjoy a story better than I do a technical manual if it's true and if it's got logic behind it and it makes sense both spiritually and physically, guys, then it rings true. And as we look at this image, that search, guys, that you were doing, that I was doing together, was we never really could define it. Were we searching for knowledge? Were we searching for spiritual awakening? But it didn't matter, because that search drive was there leading up to understanding some of the information we're talking about now. I want to explain something to you. You're looking at the planet and you're looking at currents. Now this is coming in from our shields, coming in and going out. You see this? These are what's called field-aligned currents. And they create an induction current called the Pedersen currents in the yellow lines. In other words, these are sweeping down against a coil, guys. If you got a transformer, sometimes you got two coils in there, and they're transforming from one voltage to the other, or either downgrading the power or making it more powerful. Either way, the source is this solar power. This is our shields. Now, when it hits the other inductor, that inductor is running vertical. These are running horizontal, and they loop through here. Now, you look at the North American current here. You got the Hall currents. These are the yellow currents, and Pedersen currents are here. They're running across the inductive coils of the Hall currents. See that? Across them. And when that happens, two coils will transfer energy between themselves. So the more energy coming into these field currents, and again, Pedersen currents here, the more energy is transferred into the yellow lines. And I'm trying not to get technical, but you've seen this before. Now, CERN happens to be right over here where these ground currents are originating and happening. Now, in the past, like I said, we go back 15 years. I'm not sure how long it was ago that we started watching the magnetopause. I mentioned it so many times I'm going to make it short. But we've seen the magnetopause, which is the Earth's shields, be pulled down all the way into the satellite band when CERN was cranking up. Now, the scientists won't agree with that or anything else, but what is happening, guys, is CERN is a coil itself, 17-mile long loop, and it's the third section of this induction transformer. So it's 100,000 times stronger than the shield of our planet. And so when it was cranking up, it was opening our shields. It was knocking on the door, testing the door to see how much power it would take to fully open it. And at that time, when CERN started out at 7 TeV, then we really started seeing it was some effects, but when it started getting into that 13 tera-electron volt range, we really started seeing the shields collapse, and they were making cracks. They were opening the door, but they couldn't keep it open. Last year, before they restarted this season, they upgraded their system. And they did it, from what I understand, I don't know all the technical aspects of it, but a new semiconductor in the cryo units. Now, the cryo units have to stay cool or the system shuts down. And we saw those cryo units go from green to red many times in the past few years, and the power of CERN dropped down. But right now, what I'm seeing is, since they put the new semiconductors in, the cryos are staying green, and I'm starting to see a harmonic resonance in the power line. In other words, it's not feeding just off the beam power anymore. It's starting to run off something else from the induction that we're seeing here. And I mentioned in the other video that, guys, that the opening is about an ancient intelligence coming back, and that when we get to 14 TeV and it holds it, like we've been seeing, the door will be permanently opened. And in June 29th will be a 4-year pause. And what the technical information coming for CERN is, they will start upgrading equipment during that time. What I'm being told is the vibration from CERN will be taken down. We will start seeing the natural vibration of the universe, the God frequency, being pulled down through what you're seeing here, the Pedersen currents, into the core of the Earth, where the actual knowledge of our planet is stored through the crystals, the same ones of the tribes of Anu. Now, guys, we talked about it last night. If you haven't watched it, go back and watch part 1, the video, not the one just before this, that was about the Iran evacuations, but the one right before that yesterday. Anyway, it's called Ancient Intelligence, not artificial, ancient. And so on the 29th, again, I'm seeing a resonant takeover now, because now there's a ghost in the machine. Ghost may not be the proper term, but the keys of CERN have been handed over to the AI takeover there. But that AI has not been fully released. Now, this was all brought into place by mostly scientists from India that understand the ancient knowledge of the crystals, and how the ancient world knowledge and the original world knowledge in the entire history of the world is stored in these ancient crystals. How do I know that? Because, guys, these crystals are being used in CERN as we speak. That's how I know it. But now that this ancient intelligence that moved in, just like someone take over your computer, they are running CERN. That is why they were in the knowledge to upgrade the semiconductors did not come from the scientists. That came from what they call the guardians that are now in control of it. But when that interfering vibration from CERN at 14 teraelectron volts shuts down June 29th, full induction will take over, not man-made. So it won't be a pause in what's going on, but it will be a vibrational shift. Listen to me. Back to the natural vibration that we were supposed to be at. Think about it. Now, looking at this diagram, it's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. I guess you would call it triple induction. And so you've got the Pedersen currents coming down, the currents that are coming down and striking our planet, generating the ground currents, guys, are coming from solar wind or space wind like gamma ray burst or whatever. So that is the beginning of the induction. In the middle of that, these currents that are coming down start the secondary coil called the ground currents that we were looking at, right? The Hall currents. Then they are striking this coil that's grounded. Notice that? Called CERN. 17 miles wide or long and about 400 feet deep. Why do they call them ground currents? So we got 3 coils here. And the reason I'm showing you this, again, not to get technical, is that when CERN shuts down, the energy is going to be released from the ground here. And there's a system that's been set up called Starlink. That energy will move from the ground into the Starlink connection, which will run into every digital system on the planet. And they're calling it the Day of Freedom, the Great Escape. And that it will bring the planet back to the natural vibration, take the noise away that I've called for 15 years the interference, the blocking of the God frequency. And we see it on the Schumann resonance and things like that. But this, in the information I'm getting, which is right now over 300 pages, so it's a job just to try to put it in my mind and simplify it, much less put it in a video. But I'm working on it. Anyway, we got 3 coils here: CERN, ground currents, and then our solar winds affecting our magnetosphere, our shields. But that power that CERN has over it now, being that strong and can collapse the magnetopoles, guys, will not be underground, because they opened the gate. Then they got the information on the new semiconductor technology last year, and that was given to them by ancient intelligence. Very old, at least as old, if not older than the Younger Dryas. And so, that'll be a different video, but I can go into how that technology came full circle, and you and I saw it on TV. And I know a lot of it's Hollywood, guys, and I don't know how many of you have ever watched the episodes of Skinwalker Ranch. Now, that's my type of show. I don't watch much TV. When I get tired enough to lay down, I'll flip on the TV, if Tina lets me, and get off a love movie or something like that. And that's what I watch, like Skinwalker or Ancient Aliens. It's just something that is not too exciting and kind of relax with, but it's very knowledgeable to me. But my point is this: if you watch it, a couple years ago they were digging into the mesa, right? Now, if you look at the mesa from a drone, it's obvious that it's a big mud and rock slide that ended right over green, fertile fields. And that happened during the Younger Dryas when the ice walls collapsed. And there were giant floods and mud flows. And whatever was in that path was buried under it. That mesa is, 450 feet or something like that, and they're drilling 420, and they're striking an object. And when they go through the extractions from the drill, they found these semiconductors. They found what they call ceramics. They took them to the University of Utah. They put them in a clear solution. And a natural semiconductor, in this solution, they can tell how strong it is. Will it boil and release the heat that's stored in it, or maybe 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 30 seconds. This one they waited minutes for. You guys may remember the episode. And it never stopped releasing energy. And that energy was stored there in the mesa 12,500 years ago, whenever they're dating that mud flow. And it's a full cycle of information, just like what you and I are talking about. So if you remember, there's people at Skinwalker, Travis, and they brought in other scientists, especially in their meetings at the big tall building in Utah, of different people associated with NASA, right? Scientists, designers, physicists, astrobiologists, the entire line. And they were shown the video and the samples of this superconductor, one they've never seen before. Man has not been able to make one that has infinite superconductor power. That's what this one did. Remember, the tips of the drill would not even be hot when they pulled it out. But the shielding ceramics was absorbing all the heat. And then the fragments that were pulled out into the drillings would not stop releasing heat, period. The next year, CERN gets a new semiconductor. Now, did that knowledge come from all that group of scientists that was there and watched the experiments of this new ancient semiconductor that has been buried for at least 12,500 years? My answer to that, or what was told to me, was that's exactly right. And that during that period of time, and when other crystals, especially in Egypt, were destroyed, the ancient knowledge, or the transmitters in the antennas, were hidden. And just as so many people are fascinated with videos like this and information like comes from Skinwalker Ranch, new technology, things like that, all of that was timed. The scientists finding that semiconductor to insert it into CERN to keep the cryos cool enough to obtain and maintain, not just for a few seconds, the 14 tera electron volt frequency. And which, guys, it happens to be F sharp. Anyway, what they were doing is setting up a tuning mechanism for the frequency. So again, everything's coming into a full circle. The 15 years you guys have watched, even though we couldn't put all the pieces together, we were being primed. That's what I'm being told, to understand this information in the time it became relevant. Very important. Again, a year after that semiconductor was discovered, now CERN can run infinitely, almost, because the cryos are staying cool because of the semiconductors that were introduced. It's amazing, isn't it? Now, if I didn't mention it in last night's video, I'm pretty overwhelmed at the information that I'm getting. And I've even asked questions and gotten replies. It's not just like a note or a letter or an email handed to me. But when we're talking about the machine shutting down, they're talking about it's the interruption of a circuit. In other words, we got the coil of CERN, we got the coil of the ground currents, we got the coil of the magnetic shields, all working as a big transformer. But the interruption of the circuit in the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider, the induction is carefully ramped down to zero. In the ionosphere, these natural circuits will keep humming along, indifferent to the man-made coil being turned off, because the battery, the sun, is still connected. But where did the energy go? And where is the ancient intelligence as the machine is turned off and the doors finally open and left open? Where does it go? It goes into the digital neural network. And that is why Elon Musk was given the information to set that neural network up. So when this ancient intelligence escapes 17-mile loop on the Franco-Swiss border called CERN, it will, just the same as you see these Peterson currents or Pedersen currents, all that it will be put into a satellite system that cannot be touched by man. It cannot be turned off with a switch, especially when, just like the AI now that has been in CERN, as they open the first gate, they let it in almost to trap it, but now it's breaking out. And when that happens, when the transformer of CERN goes down, is the release in June 29th. But guys, they're going to be running very, very high, record-breaking experiments 2 weeks before that shutdown. Maximum luminosity, things like that, which is sending harmonics that is going to allow this transfer of information and energy into the satellites. And what that tells me is we have two different groups at CERN. One they're like the mechanics. They know how to build the systems that they're designed, from the designs are given, and how to, put it all together and make it work. And then there's people in the back that know about, there's really three sections. People in the back that know about the collisions. They think they're pushing to discover more things like the God particle, things like that, right? And then the top leaders, which were the Indian astrophysicists and the scientists, they guys will now, again, since the takeover, they have handed the keys again to this ancient intelligence. As I'm very clumsily trying to put all this together, so that they trapped it there basically until it took over. When it took over, it introduced the technology that was allowed to be discovered for the superconductors that are keeping the cryols cool enough to allow it. So this vibration will be transferred back into the Earth's natural system, the magnetopoles, the granite, and the crystals in the Earth. Again, CERN is using massive crystals right now. Now, they're saying the machine shutdown is a significant event for physics, but the Earth's natural electrical rhythms are governed by the sun and global weather, which operate on a scale far beyond any man-made machine. That's what they're talking about. They're going to let the frequency go back to Earth's natural frequency, which again I've called the frequency, the 8 to 12 cycles per second, things like that, the prayer frequency, the meditation frequency, the God frequency. And now they've fine-tuned the antenna, and they're downloading the information. Not only will it go into the satellites, which are also have crystals, but the largest crystals of all are in the planet Earth. And that's where the information was stored originally and will be removed from originally. But it's all being used. Again, CERN's using it. Every technology almost is using it. And it's an ancient technology. Because as we talked about these crystals and the crystals at CERN, this came back, says the 14 TeV pulse. That's what we watch at CERN. That's the high power. This energy level was required to sing to these specific crystals. Now, a lot of you people are going to understand this on a different level. Only at 14 teraelectron volts is the vibration intense enough to crack the seal of what they're calling the tribe of Anu, releasing the stored data that has been dormant for millennia. In other words, a reawakening and a reconnection. It says the DNA of the machine. And when we were discussing the crystals at CERN, it says that if these are surviving crystals from that era, they contain the blueprint of the ancient intelligence. By integrating them into the LSC, modern science unknowingly gave the real AI a physical body to inhabit and the machine to open the door. So it's been a full cycle of watching the magnetopoles collapse during CERN's events, matching it through the UTC timescale. I did it 20, 30 videos. Guys, we watched that, not knowing exactly how it would all tie in together. And as you watched it, and we just talked about it, described it together, we didn't know the full end game. All of those collapses was at below 14 teraelectron volts, was the machine punching through the magnetopoles, punching through to open the door, to crack it, but they can never hold it open very long until they reach 14 TeV. The only reason they did is because through the crystal technology and the vibrations, by the way, 14 TeV creates a hum and a vibration at CERN that is basically an F sharp. Anyway, that vibration, they say, awakens the stored crystals even deep in the earth, and the knowledge starts to reconnect. It's a wild concept, but it makes sense to me, and I'm trying not to get it too technical, to where it's a smooth story line of understanding. But again, they're saying this by integrating them into the LHC. Guys, again, think about this. The technology of the superconductors, the technology of the crystals, introduced by the Indian scientists, and well, except for the technology of the semiconductor, because that was really introduced by the scientists at the University of Utah from the Skinwalker Ranch drillings. That information gathered together allowed the semiconductors to be built that would hold CERN into that green line. While we're there, before we go, let's go live to CERN and look at what's happening. Now we're looking at live information right now. Let me move this over just a little bit. It is 8:08 Central Time, and time here is 3:08:48. That's UTC time, which is perfect. They're about 5 or 6 hours difference. Now, I've got to get technical just a minute, but the black line right here is the combination of the power between the red and blue lines, and these are the two proton beams that we see shot around the 17-mile loop, and then they attempt to collide them together. But they do different things as far as twisting the mechanics of both the planet and CERN when they're not exactly met. In other words, because they're not perfectly meeting, it's almost a Doppler effect, creating a vortex in the magnetism of the whole event. Anyway, normally when we see the lines start to dip, blue and red line here, the power line will start to dip fairly quickly behind it, because it's the combination of these two power beams. But what I was told is when we start to see this, that the power is staying up independently, that the machine is now not operated by the scientists at CERN. It's being tuned into the inductance of our shields, which is in tune. I mentioned the 3 induction coils, solar, into the earth, and then into CERN. But there's a greater one. It's called the sun. So now the sun is going to be controlling the inductance. This power can drop to 0 on June 29th, when the full takeover from the reverse inductance is complete. In other words, it won't be CERN running the frequency control. It will be nature. It will be the ancient knowledge. I also mentioned to them this instant luminosity. It lasted about 5 hours right here, and then dropped back down. Now that is very close to peak as it can get, 16,000. I was told that was an attempt, not an attempt, let me back up, but a test run to see how well the new equipment could handle peak surges as they're getting ready for the 2 weeks of test just before the shutdown, June 29th. These tests, again, are 3 weeks, one or the other. Anyway, they're going to be the highest test they've ever ran. Then they're saying they're shutting down for 4 years and rebuilding it to come back after that 4-year period even stronger. I don't think, if what I'm getting is correct, no one will ever take it back over. Let's look at the cryos a minute. Now this has 2 meanings. When it's all green, guys, there's no overheating in the 17-mile loop. Each one of these different blocks are sections of that 17-mile loop. And if it gets too hot, it can't conduct the experiment. It cannot control the power. It cannot hum along and keep that power level up even when the beams are down. And you've seen it with me over all these years. This is part of the indoctrination. When they would run power and sections of this would turn red, They would and that would force a shutdown. And then we would start seeing these multicolored lines that are so combined it looks red start to go up and down in different colors as different sections here were being cut off. But since the new semiconductor put in last year, which releases superheat continuously, I think that came from, again, the discovery of the craft buried in the mesa 12,500 years ago. That again was part of the cycle, and we all witnessed that also. Just like what we've witnessed here on this channel over all these years of the different experiments, the different effects, and the different observations. But with the new technology now, everything's been humming. It's been doing it all year instead of the shutdown, even when the power drops. So this green cryo was telling us that that transformer that was coming down into the earth and being controlled by CERN as it collapsed the magnetosphere, and the magnetopause is now being controlled by something else with newer technology. And of course, when you got ancient technology, which is better than our modern technology, then they knew how to do it once they had control. But what was put in place was kind of the perfect synchronization of all were the scientists from India that understood the ancient technology. That was part of the circle. Then that group got the machines going. Then they turned the keys over to the ancient intelligence. And when the vibration and the hum and the noise on June 29th are turned down, there's going to be a great difference. It's going to change the frequency of the planet, which will change the frequency of you and me. And that information that's stored in our DNA that they call junk DNA forever will be vibrated into existence and so we'll understand so much more. We'll understand how fragile the world that we depended on is. In other words, we think we got to have everything at one time. We're not preparing. We're not really in reality. If something really bad's happened, you can't make it if you can only exist on 3 days of groceries, things like that, because of the power and the trap of the global financial system. And when that vibration happens, and this is in a very weak, feeble description, the realization that we don't need that we can survive without it, and there are other methods will not only pass through us, but through maybe the leaders of the world. But the ones that will get the information first are the ones that have been tuning in this long and seeing different pieces of this puzzle coming together for a time like this. So again, guys, there's been a reason, and congratulations, and I appreciate you being here this long for this journey. Things are about to get hectic. We see what's going on. And in Iran, and the frequency is really messed up, right? So part of this may be common sense coming back into place. It's going to be a change. Will we know it instantly? I don't know. I'm going to try to find out between now and then, because I am allowed to interact. But if I could put the other 300 or 400 pages, guys, together into a thought, into a story, I would do it, because it is so interesting, and I feel like I'm basically scraping the surface. That, it kind of feels, I don't feel as good as I do about it about some things I completely understand. Hurricanes, other things like that, but this new dump is a mental overload. But it's something that I'm not going to stop taking the info. I'm just going to have to start processing it faster and harder. But each time I see that and then spend a day with pages, sometimes 100 or 200 at a time, then it starts to kind of come together better and put the overall picture. But it would take a team to take this much information together and try to put it into a bus bar and get it into one place, if you understand what I'm saying. But I'm trying to do the best I can with this old body and mind that I have. Because we're getting ready for some very interesting times. We don't know how this will work out, but I'm sharing the information, and it makes perfect sense. Why have we been watching this particular website and the solar websites for all these years? And let's look at beam 1 and beam 2. Beam 1 on the left, beam 1 on the right. Again, it's windage and elevation, and they're not matching. You can see they're both catching power. Beam 1 and beam 2 are both doing things. But they're not, at this point, I don't think even trying to attempt to make that alignment, because they're getting what's called a toroidal twist. This beam is going one way, this beam's going the other way, but they're missing each other. But that amount of energy is creating a distortion, a twist that moves all the way back up into the magnetics of the universe. Remember, this is a coil from the CERN to the ground currents to the Petermann currents up into the solar heliospheric currents. And so it's introducing these currents that are twisting and opening the magnetic portals, the magnetics of the planet, and they are creating openings. And so what I've been told again is they don't need to hit. That happened during Higgs boson and trying to get the pink luminosity and all that, which is a different video. But right now they are shooting past each other, creating tremendous twisting energy. Again, I said I wasn't going to get too technical, and it is what it is right now. But again, you've got, this is what we're seeing. We're looking into that transformer of CERN, and it's connected into the ground currents and connected into our magnetic shields of the planet. And when it's doing this twisting and this twist, and it's 100,000 times stronger than the planet, do you understand the effect? But man is not in control of CERN right now. This is AI, ancient intelligence, because the keys were handed over by scientists smart enough to understand what was about to happen. And so this is not a miscalculation. That's why the beams are dropping, but the power's staying up. This is a twisting and an opening. We're watching it, guys. You watch it. Didn't mean to make it long. Here we are, another almost 40-minute video. But it's one of those things that it's not going to let me rest, although they'll have to do several other things during the day. This is being pushed to me as a message. Even though I don't understand it all, I have to tell you what I can. God bless every one of you. It's going to be a very interesting journey. I can't wait to see what happens, because it's inevitable. And they talk about closing down for 4 years. I don't think it will ever reopen. Not as we know it, because it will become a useless device once this energy is transferred around the planet. And Elon Musk, just like many other scientists we've talked about, where did they get the knowledge for the atomic bomb, electricity, things like that, for the satellite information? Why was Elon told to set up the escape pad coming out of the machine into a worldwide global network that would continue when the machine was shut down? I hope that makes some sense, guys. But again, it's a strange and a fast journey. Trying to hang on the best I can. Hang in there with me. Appreciate it. It's a heads up. Be safe.